In this video, we'll take a look at configuring a Juniper device through the Juniper Web Device Manager. Now, the Web Device Manager is available on many different versions of Juniper devices, specifically the SRX series devices. Now, I've already connected to the Juniper device, and up top you can see I've plugged in the IP address of 192.168.1.1, which is the default address of the device out of the box. Now, once I type that address in and the Juniper Web Device Manager webpage comes up, I'm asked to log in. So I type in my username of root and my password. Now, once I've logged into the Juniper Web Device Manager, also known as JWeb, you can see there's many tabs up top here. Now, the tab that I'm going to take a look at here in this video is the Configure tab. The Configure tab is where we can go to apply or change the configuration of the device. But you can see here the web interface has many other tabs. We have a dashboard that we can use to view the status of the device itself. So if I click on the dashboard link here, you can see it's loading the data. So I can see information about the device itself. So I can see the host name is BOSS R1. I can see the version of the software, the BIOS version of the device as well. Over to the right, you can see some resource utilization, so CPU utilization, memory utilization, that kind of idea. What I also like up top here is you can actually get a visual interface of the device, and you can see there is a connection to that fast Ethernet 0/0/0, and then also a connection to the fast Ethernet 0/0/4. So that's kind of nice. We get that visual representation of kind of the status of the device itself. Now let me go back to the Configure tab here, and I'm not going to go through all the configuration options, but I do want to just kind of give you a high-level overview of the types of things that we can do here. You will notice when I click on Configure, I can see the name of the device, so it's the Boston R1 device that I'm configuring. I can see who I'm logged in as well. Over on the right, we can see in the actions, notice that there is something like there's a commit and a compare and a discard your changes. And also we can go into the preferences as well here. There's a logout link if I want to log out at any point in time, and also a help link so that you can kind of figure out how to configure this device. So just a few things that I want to point out on the Configure tab up top here. Over on the left, you do have a task menu item over on the left-hand side, and this is where they located many different wizards for you to easily configure the device. So notice that there is a setup wizard. So when you initially purchase the device, you can run that setup wizard. I'm going to run that in a few minutes here, but you'll also notice there's a VPN wizard and a NAT wizard as well that you could run. So I'm going to come back to that in a few minutes. We also have an interfaces link on the left-hand side where I can go and I can check out the different interfaces or the ports on the device. So here I can see we've got our fast Ethernet 0/0/0. If I expand that out, I can see the logical interface. So I can see the status on those interfaces. I can see the IP address assigned to that logical interface and the zone as well. Now, if I want to edit that interface, I can select the interface, and over to the right, you will see options such as disable or enable may appear on the right-hand side. There's a delete option. If you want to modify the selected item that's on the screen, then there's an edit link. So I'll click that, and you'll notice that it does come up with the properties of my interface here. So I can change some of those settings. Like for instance, if I wanted to, I could change the IP address of that interface. Now, when you take a look at modifying the IP address, you can see here that I can either change the address from a static address point of view, or I can configure this interface to use DHCP. So there's an enable DHCP option there. I can also go and enable IP version 6 addressing for this interface, or I can go and treat this as a Ethernet switch port, so I can place it in access mode if I wanted to for, let me turn off that IP version 4 first. There we go. So I should be able to come over here and say, okay, this port is in access mode. So a client will connect to the port, and the client will get the IP address, not the actual port itself, right? Now, in my case, I'm actually treating this as a port for routing, not for clients to connect to. So I will go back and enable that. So that's the point, is that you can configure the ports if you wanted to. Over here on interface, we also have NAT configuration, so you can configure NAT. We also have a wizard for that. What else? VPN configuration. So there's some IPsec VPN. Wireless LAN settings. So you can configure your wireless LAN environment. In switching as a category, I'll just spend a few seconds here. You can configure the different VLANs if you wanted to. So if I expand out switching and go to VLAN, you'll notice that we do have two VLANs. There's a default VLAN, which is VLAN ID number 1, and then there's a second VLAN called VLAN Trust that's created here. Again, you can highlight those and you can hit edit, right, to modify their settings. Or if you wanted to, you could add an additional VLAN by hitting the add button, give the VLAN an ID number, and then give it a name as well, right? So I could call that the accounting VLAN if I wanted to. You could specify which ports are to exist in this VLAN. So I can hit the add button. Actually, I have no available ports because they're all in the other VLANs. So normally you'd see the ports here that you've added. Yeah, so that's the idea of being able to add those VLANs in there. So graphically, we can go and configure our VLANs, or also from a switching point of view, the spanning tree protocol can be configured there as well. On the routing topic, if I expand out routing, you can see here that we can configure static routing. So I can go to static routing, and I can add a static route if I wanted to. I can specify the network ID and then the next hop address. You can also configure our routing protocols like RIP or OSPF through here as well. So you can see I do have one RIP group created called RIP-group. So that's our routing settings. Also down below here we have system properties where you can go and configure just settings about the system. So things like the name of the device, so it's the Boston R1. There's your root password. You could alter that here. So I can hit the edit link to modify these settings if I wanted to. So those are some of the settings that appear on the left. Now what I want to do here is just show you, I'm going to go up to task and I'm going to run through the setup wizard just very quickly here. So it wants to know, do I want to modify the existing configuration or create a new configuration? I'm going to create a new configuration. It wants to know if we want to be guided step by step or use default configuration. I want to be guided through the steps. So I hit next. Wants to know if we want to do basic options or advanced options. I'll just go with basic options here for my first trip through. And then it wants to know what the name of the device is. So again, I'll say it's Boston R1. The username is root for the root account, and our password, I'll plug in our password. You can create additional administrative accounts if you wanted to. So I'll hit the add button here and I'll say Glenn. I'll go with the same password as my root account, and I will make Glenn a super user. So I hit done. So there's an additional account that was created. So I hit next. Wants to know what we do about time. So do you want to manually set the time on the device, or does it connect to a time server? So I'll leave that and then change my time zone here to my time zone, and then I'll hit next. It summarizes these basic settings, right? And then when I hit next, it's going to move into security topology for this device. So it's going to get me to set up the internet zone, the DMZ, and the internal zone. So with this device, it kind of separates different portions of the network into zones. And it's going to ask me about the basic setup of this device. So this is kind of what I have as a setup is the Juniper devices here. I do have a kind of one of the ports connected out to the internet, and the other ports are going to be part of my internal network. So I'm going to hit next. Wants to know how we're doing this, so how the internet access is going to be given. So it's going to be through cable modem, we'll say, and then hit next. Wants to know two things. How are we going to get the IP address assignment? It's going to be dynamic, and which port is plugged into the internet, and it's going to be the VDSL port. So I'll choose next. Then it wants to know about a DMZ. Now I'm going to say yes here. It says, do you want to set up a DMZ? When I choose yes, it wants to know which ports on this device are part of the DMZ. So if you want port 0 part of the DMZ, then you can just select that. Now in my case, I'm not actually going to have a DMZ, so I'm going to choose no. And then it moves on to the internal network. It wants to know which one of these best represents your internal network. So do you want to have multiple zones set up like IT and marketing? I'm going to go with no. It's just one internal network zone. So then it wants to know what the name of the internal network zone is going to be. I think internal sounds great. Wants to know the IP address range. So we'll go with 2.1 or 1.1 sounds good. Yeah, perfect. I'll leave it at this. Select the ports that are going to be part of that internal zone. I'll say port 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and port 7 are going to be part of this internal zone. Do we want to respond to ping requests on the interfaces, and do we enable the DHCP server feature of this device? Yes, I want to do yes to all those. So I hit next. DHCP configuration be 1.2 up to 254, perfect. So I'll hit done, and then I'll choose next. Next thing they want to do here is specify the security settings, and with these security settings, they do it all based off these policies, right? So in the policies kind of control who, which zones can communicate with which other zones. I'm just going to accept the defaults here. They do want to know about the licensing. So I do want to automatically retrieve the licensing. So I'll choose next. And then here's our zones. The pictures are nice here. So, we want the default action is the internet zone can communicate with the internal zone, right? But because I don't have a DMZ, we're not going to have that set up. So you can see here, internal and internet zones, we do allow communication from internal to internet. So I'll just accept that, but there is an add button for you to go and add additional communication. Management zones, we can manage this device from internal. I don't want to manage the device from the internet. And these are the protocols that we can use to manage this device. So notice that HTTP is there, Telnet's there. So I hit next. Would you like it to allow remote workers? So this will be VPN configuration on the device. I'm going to go with a no, but I want you to notice that, the wizard would walk us through VPN configuration. So then it summarizes our security setup. So that's great. And now it's going to finally go into NAT. And it wants to know what are the source addresses for NAT, and it's any systems connected to the internal zones. Remember which were those 7 ports. So I choose next, and then it wants us to go and complete the setup. So I'm going to hit next, and we're going to apply these settings. So in this demonstration, you saw how to configure the Juniper device through the Juniper Web Device Manager.